It's a very funny title to be like reading in public.
And Jake, I don't know if you can see that sticker, but it was great value.
That is great value, £5, beautiful. So my last book for this week's stack is, sorry, that book's enormous, Better Than Revenge
Such a close-up.
sorry, I nearly ruined the camera.
Hello and welcome to Stack, the books podcast that's here to help you fall in love and stay in love with reading. I'm Ella, I work in book publishing.
I'm Jake, I'm a writer and a podcast producer. In every episode, we'll be building a themed stack of books that we love and that we know you will too.
This week's theme is revenge, but before we get into delicious literary payback, Jake, how was your week?
It was lovely. I've actually done lots of reading, which is surprising given that
reading.
The podcast has been busy. We've been getting our first few eps out. And I've got a throwback from the pod. Do you remember when I mentioned Harry Trewaldwyn's Romantic
Tragedies of a Drama King? Yes, and then I read it and I love that as well.
There is, you'll be pleased to know, a sequel. It's called I Can't Believe I Don't Have a Boyfriend. I didn't hear about this until it was literally out, which was perfect because I didn't have to wait at all.
I love that.
It's a very funny title to be like reading in public. I'm quite enjoying. And you'll be pleased to know it's as good, if not better than the first. But I can't go on enough about how funny the
first one was really funny, and it's definitely not one that I felt like needed a sequel. It felt like we kind of ended it in a really good place, but I would love to read more from Patch and the gang. Do we start with him single again then, because I felt like there was so much promise for him with a relationship at the end of the last one?
No, we very much just check in at the end of right back from where we ended on book one.
We just pick right up. Love that.
But it's not all plain sailing.
Yes, it can't be. I think I might have talked about this in the podcast before, but Marianne Keyes, when she wrote Again, Rachel, which is a sequel to Rachel's Holiday, but you can't just... I mean, I think I said at the time, I obviously would read a whole book of them just, like, having a nice life, but actually, like, just narratively, you need a bit more than that. So I think to give a sequel, you often have to throw some more obstacles in their way, but that sounds great. I will read after you. And
stats-wise, I would say laughing out loud every 3 pages. Ella, what have you been up to?
I have been, sort of endlessly taking books out of the library and returning them, which, okay, I hear what you're thinking. That's what you do with the library. But what I'm doing is I'm taking them out, starting reading them, deciding it's not for me, and then taking them back. Made possible because it's a library and I'm not like, oh, I've bought this.
Do you take Baby?
I do take Baby to the library. We actually both got library cards on the same day, which I thought was really cute of us. They haven't taken any books out yet, weirdly.
These books that we're talking about today are about revenge. Can you think of a time that you've had revenge? I really struggled thinking of personal...
Of times when you've taken revenge.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why it's so fun to read about, because it's the kind of the stuff that you don't do. I mean, some of mine are a bit intense, then obviously I wouldn't do. The time I most wanted to take revenge would be... So when I was very heavily pregnant, I was walking down a road into town and it was really, really rainy and there was this huge puddle and I just saw this car stop at the top of the hill and I was like, that car's going to splash me. And the car kind of started coming down the hill and then deliberately sped up, swerved into the puddle and splashed me head to toe with puddle water. Isn't that awful? And I was so angry. And I think in real life, you don't really get to follow up on these things. What I actually would have liked to happen is I'd liked them to stood in front of me and I would have liked to pour a bucket of dirty puddle water over their head and then have them have to go to work.
God, I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Thank you so much. My sister was furious about it.
We're thinking about revenge and thinking you should have hired an Etsy witch. Have you heard about these?
No.
There's people on Etsy that are I'm a witch and give me the information and I will enact
That's
your
really
wishes.
good because I did consider calling the police.
Yeah.
I didn't though because they're busy and they've got other things to do. But I did look it up and I was like, this can't be legal. And then anyway, it's not legal. You're not allowed to do that. But how am I going to find them? But actually, if I'd hired a witch, then I wouldn't have needed to find them.
Did you get the license plate? You actually could have reported it.
I know I could have done, but I didn't get the license plate because I was too busy being sad. Anyway, when did you want to get revenge on somebody?
I've really struggled thinking of this for this episode because I don't think you ever really get revenge.
Because you're such a pure, kind heart.
And obviously that. I don't think you ever get revenge. I also think you sometimes people hurt you and then you don't know what they're doing or where they are, who they are. You just lose contact. So I don't know when you... And sometimes I think you think, one day you'll get your comeuppance, but then it's but actually if something horrible happened to you, that's actually I don't want that to happen.
I do think life just kind of sorts it out. If someone is really horrible to you and they're going around being horrible to everyone, I do think they will have the life that they deserve.
The revenge is that they are a horrible person.
That's the best revenge.
Because revenge, and we'll talk about this in these books, has to fit, the punishment has to befit the crime. So
yeah.
like,
oh, that's so interesting, yeah.
something bad happening to that person isn't necessarily closure for the thing that you would want revenge for.
Yes.
And I think in books, it's like, what does it mean to get revenge? Can you get revenge? Can you win? Really?
Before we get started on that, we want to say a huge thank you to our sponsor, 3am Books.
We love 3am. They are the dedicated horror imprint at Penguin Books, and they are publishing a book that I think our listeners will really enjoy. Fawn by C.N. Vare is the must-read folk horror debut of 2026. It's a primal, atmospheric, deeply unsettling story about what a woman must become to protect the creatures and land that she loves.
Jake, do you know who else loves Fawn? Friend of the podcast, author of The Lamb, Lucy Rose. Lucy called it a book filled with bite, brutality, tenderness and evil. She loved it and we think you will too. Fawn by C.N. Vare is published by 3am Books on 27th of August and you can order your copy now. Thank you so much to 3am for making this episode of Stack possible.
My first book for revenge is Speech Team by Tim Murphy. I do think this is a book that people will not have heard of, which I'm quite happy with. So Tim Murphy wrote Christadora and The Correspondence. Christadora is this like amazingly underrated book about the AIDS crisis, and I've not met anyone that's ever read that book and then not just liked it, like adored it. I highly recommend that. Mm-hmm. This book is lighter and gentler and a really fun read. So, in his early 40s, non-profit writer Tip Murray is just getting past the wreckage of his youth and settling into semi-humdrum, married New England domesticity. Things take an unusual turn when he receives shocking news from his high school best friend that one of their former teammates from Speech Team, Pete, has committed suicide. Surprisingly mentioned in Pete's final Facebook post, a devastating comment made to him by their Speech Team coach, Gary Gold. And then basically this group that were in their speech team all come together and realise they have all really dwelled on these comments that this teacher made back at that time.
Really fun. How innocuous are the comments?
They are innocuous comments, but they are deeply cutting
they
to
cut
those
to the heart of them.
people.
Yeah.
It's all about that kind of idea of like, is it healthy or right or serving you to dwell on those comments? How do you get closure on them? Can you ever get closure on them? And I don't really want to spoil this, but it's kind of like they build up to go on this road trip to go and see the teacher, Gary.
Gary Gold's a great name, by the way.
Great name for a villain. And it's kind of just, it's all about kind of the hollowness of closure and revenge and how, like, ultimately is the best kind of revenge that you are just happy and, water off a duck's back.
Yeah, because actually you spending your time kind of obsessing over it means that it just actually has ownership over your life in a bigger way. And the best revenge in that case is probably just to be free and clear.
Yeah, and what is kind of like restorative justice? Like, you ever going to get that? And also, are they ever going to get that when actually this speech team that they were all in at school is like a really positive thing? It's a lovely, nice thing that's full of lovely memories that like these are just small parts of it that they have held on to. Do you ever remember anything that a teacher said to you that has stuck with you?
Maybe not a teacher, but I would say there are like the odd things that run around my head. What teacher has ruined your life?
I had a teacher once that, this is quite dark, I kept not doing my full stops in writing, and the teacher at the front of the class asked me to come to the front of the class and then stabbed my hand with a biro pen and draw these full stops on it. Oh
my God, Jake, I think we need to hunt this teacher down and get revenge.
Yeah, I think maybe on this one we do. But I'll tell you, I never forgot full stops again. My notes for this episode are very clean.
My first book for this week's stack is Honey by Imani Thompson. Have you seen this around?
You mentioned reading it and we recommended it we did a social post about books with bee stings in.
Didn't do very well. I think that was one that we absolutely loved, the idea of being like, what if we did a whole stack of books with bees in them?
Well, there are quite a lot. There are more than you think.
There are. That's what makes it fun. Okay, so Honey by Imani Thompson. The first time, Ursa doesn't intend to kill, but the Cambridge professor sitting opposite has manipulated her friend, stolen her research. When she flicks the bee into his San Pellegrino, she thinks he'll get a nasty sting. Then he's dead. And Ursa, who, let's face it, has been bored for a while, is alive. It's a sweet feeling, finally having some control. So this is quite an extreme form of revenge, I would say.
Oh, San Pellegrino.
You think you're safe with San Pellegrino. So this act of what she intends to be like, he's going to get stung. He kind of deserves it. He has manipulated her friend and kind of knocked her confidence as well. And so she thinks he's going to get stung and then it's going to be over. And then it becomes clear that he is having some kind of allergic reaction to the bee sting. And she just decides to do nothing. She decides to just let that happen. She doesn't call an ambulance. She just, but then afterwards kind of acts as if, she was in shock and didn't know what to do. And so that's kind of how it starts. I think from the blurb, I maybe thought like the whole book would be around this bee sting, but actually that's kind of just kicks off a wave of her enacting her vengeance against men who have wronged her, or people in her circle, or trying to cover up other crimes that she's committed, and just like keep chasing this sweet feeling that she has. So it's kind of maybe slightly the vibe of My Sister the Serial Killer, where there's almost this kind of matter-of-factness to like, oh, this is just something she does now. She just, once she starts killing, she just can't seem to stop. I read it over one Sunday. I found it really addictive. And I think despite the fact that the main character is really unhinged and like the whole way through you're kind of like, oh God, stop it. Oh, stop it. And she's kind of high on her own success at first, but it all kind of starts to unravel for her. And you think, okay, you actually can't just keep killing people and getting away with it. But despite the fact that she's really unhinged, I really liked her as a character. I wasn't rooting for her, but I kind of was still just like loving being in her company. Like she's quite mad. There's something quite liberating about reading someone just completely acting on all of their impulses. Consequences be damned. And she kind of feels untouchable throughout it. So I'd say it's kind of, I think it is a book about revenge, but I think it stops being a book about revenge partway through. Like she has this kind of righteous anger at first, and then you kind of throughout the novel watch her tip from righteous anger into actually something that is more indulgent, like she just kind of has to satisfy her own urges. I did just find it a really enjoyable romp of a read.
Any of her killings, like revenge, is that revenge that befits the crime, or is it all?
I don't.
Like when you say it's righteous, like is some of it like, yeah, go.
Depends. Yeah, depends who you ask. So I think bee sting for the professor was punishment fits the crime. I would say letting him die from said bee sting, too much. I think she overdid it there. I think almost all of it is an overreaction, but maybe there is this level of like, what happens if this rage that you feel simmering within you all the time is suddenly unleashed in the most kind of vengeful way possible.
My next book for revenge is We Play Ourselves by Jen Silverman. I also think people won't really have heard of this.
God, he's such an influencer.
So, this book, when Cass, a 30-something promising queer playwright, receives a prestigious award, it seems as though her career is finally taking off. That is until she finds herself at the centre of a searing public shaming, which relegates her from rising star to a nobody on her best friend's sofa in LA. As she comes to terms with the extent of her failure, she is forced to question who she is without the thing that has always defined her, her art. She fills her days stalking her playwright nemesis, of whom she is excruciatingly envious, and then being pulled into the orbit of the charismatic but manipulative filmmaker next door. As Cass becomes increasingly involved with her neighbour and the group of pugilistic teenage girls she's documenting, Cass begins to dream of a comeback. But when the film spins dangerously out of control, Cass is once again forced to reckon with her ambition and her rage.
More rage, more
female rage. The idea of being at the heart of this kind of public scandal, I'm always so interested in because...
Love that. I'd love to do a whole episode on scandals.
Yeah, add it to the list. And that kind of like, quote-unquote, cancellation of someone, where it's due, where it's not due, where it's like, what have they done in proportion to the public response?
Yeah.
I think that's so interesting. And at the start, you don't necessarily know the details of why she's in this scandal and what she's done. And then when Cass meets this filmmaker who is in the same way as her, trying to make it in this field and trying to make art. You kind of watch her in these morally grey areas of what is right and wrong, but what is actually valid in pursuit of something that she thinks is so intrinsic to her in terms of being an artist and a writer. I normally don't love books about like an artist, a playwright, a filmmaker. I always find them a bit like they always seem to come from quite a privileged position, and it's assumed that people just have these jobs, and it doesn't really interrogate the machinations of the industries that would allow these people to rise to prominent positions. But I love this book because it does go into that. Like, Cass is always slightly on the outside of this experimental theatre world that she's not quite got a strong hold in. And you know, although she's quite unlikable, you also are like, oh, you've really fought to get there, and now you're kind of being kicked out. And is that right or wrong? It gets quite weird towards the end in a way that I quite like.
Right.
There's lots
we
of
like a weird book.
kind of weird puppets involved.
So my next book is The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. This is not a recommendation for you, Jake, because I have now come to accept that fantasy set in another world with a whole kind of world building setup is not for you. So this is very much a recommendation for the listeners. The Raven Scholar is one of my absolute favourite books I've read this year. She's chunky. This is a trade paperback, and it comes in at 643 pages. So every 24 years, the Empire of Orange selects a new ruler via a deadly contest. 8 factions, they're kind of monasteries in the book, send a challenger to compete. So, for example, there's the Raven, who's kind of the deity of knowledge and scholarship. Before the games start in this particular setup, the Raven faction's chosen contender is murdered. This is my jam. Like, if any kind of fantasy book with a contest or trial setup where there's going to be a series of kind of episodic challenges for our main character to take over and be a kind of underdog in. So like Hunger Games, I guess, is quite like that. Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass series is like that in the first book. I love that as a way in to reading about a world.
Hard to write, like hard to make that series of challenges different and different outcomes and jeopardy up and down.
Our heroine is Nima. She's a high scholar and a member of the Raven Monastery, and she ends up as the unlikely and unwilling Raven contender, kind of replacing this person who has been murdered. And as she's doing that, she is simultaneously investigating the murder and just trying to stay alive throughout the tournament, because this is not something that she's trained for her whole life. She did not intend to be in this position. Her investigation uncovers a lot more than she bargained for. There is a kind of, and why I picked it for a revenge is, I mean, partly because I just absolutely love this book, but there is this kind of shadow hanging over the book in that before the main action of the book takes place, there was a failed coup. There was a terrible and cruel punishment that was visited on somebody who wasn't the actual perpetrator of the coup, but they kind of bore the consequences for it. And that Nima, our heroine, was a fringe participant in this terrible consequence for somebody. So that kind of hangs over the book. So it's kind of like everyone's out to get revenge on each other. There's huge rivalry as well between each faction, and lots of kind of political context. It's super smart. I think part of the reason I loved it, I love romantasy as a genre. There is a lot of it about at the moment. It's definitely an area of the market that is getting really invested in. Then we have lots of books coming out, taking up lots of space in bookshops. It's a genre I really love, but it's also really nice just to have a really chunky fantasy novel where there is a little bit of romance in it, but that's not the main plot. The main plot is driven by this quite intricate kind of political background and the fun of these trials and challenges. Those trials give loads of momentum to the plot as well, because you're kind of like, that one's finished, we're on to the next one. I can't wait to read about how she tackles this one in her own very unique way. So it's kind of a whodunit. It's kind of a contest set fantasy book. It's kind of a what they done. It's a whodunit and a what they done.
Okay, my last book for this week's stack is, sorry, that book's enormous, Better Than Revenge by, sorry, nearly ruined the camera. B. Fitzgerald, Better Than Revenge. This is very new. I read this very recently. B has written a lot of YA, and this is one of her first books for adults. This is juicy, and this is such a perfect book for revenge. The book follows Nadine, who gets into a top drama school where she meets Harper. Nadine has very much like grafted to get into this drama school. She's not got a good relationship with her parents. She has inheritance from her granddad, who's the one that really was like, you can be an actor, you're going to do this, pursue it at all costs. And Harper is someone where it all seems to have kind of happened for her easily. So they, in the first year of drama school, they start this kind of really kind of childish, like a competition, frenemy situation. It's kind of got shades of like Glinda and Alphabet in Wicked.
Fun.
It kind of starts off, I would say, quite like, someone says something horrible and you overhear it in the toilets, or they're both competing for the same role in the show, or they both fancy the same boy. And then they both kind of get on this whirlwind roller coaster of becoming famous and becoming like world famous Hollywood actors, and still maintaining this now like very public feud. It does kind of stretch incredulity that they both do rise this far, and like, we go to the Oscars, like we're in LA, like where you kind of see all these amazing like set pieces of that world. And it really escalates to a really stressful degree of like, no, not this, and like, oh, you're doing this. And B writes it so well in that you hear Nadine's perspective is the main thrust of the book, but in between chapters you get these kind of like snippets of people's testimony and newspaper headlines and things in a kind of documentary format from like presumably years later.
Yeah.
So it kind of plays with the idea of like what the public know, what they know is going on behind closed doors. It's a constant back and forth of who's won, really, like who's, okay, they've done this amazing move, but actually then the other one's kind of done this and screwed you over and got the part. And I raced through it. It's like juicy, revenge in spades.
My final book for this week's stack is The Favourites, Layne, Fargo. And Jake, I don't know if you can see that sticker, but it was great value.
That is great value, £5, beautiful. I've wanted to read this for ages, and I think a listener recommended this to us.
Yes. Yeah. It's not the first book to be suggested by a listener as part of their shelf-help dilemma that I've been like, I'm just going to make a note of that one. That sounds really good.
Yeah, and I've not had a chance to read this yet, but you obviously have.
I have read it. It's similar to Better Than Revenge in that it's got that documentary style format in there. So this is the book that asks the question on all of our lips: what if Heathcliff and Cathy were ice dancers?
I've asked that a few times.
You've asked it before, you're always asking me. Did you know this was a Wuthering Heights retelling?
No, I would have read it instantly. I'm now going to read this tomorrow.
Sure. So childhood sweethearts turned Olympic champions, Heath and Kat have captivated fans with their scorching chemistry and roller coaster relationship on and off the ice. Until that fateful day, as the world watched, the unthinkable happened. Everyone saw it, nobody knows the truth, but that's about to change. So throughout the book, there are these documentary-style reactions to... it's like there's a documentary that kind of charts their whole working relationship and how they knew each other as teenagers, and then their kind of growth in ice dancing, in technical terms, leading up to this kind of one fateful day and what happened. I would say it took me an embarrassingly long time to realise it was a Wuthering Heights retelling, considering they're called Cat and Heath. I feel like...
Cat and Heath give it away at all, or...?
No, I think you probably would... I think the names would change just enough. Things that are similar with Wuthering Heights, they meet as teenagers, they're kind of raised together because of reasons, but they're from different backgrounds. And then, not in Wuthering Heights, Kat really wants to be an ice dancer. And so Heath kind of goes along with it because he wants to be with Kat. And the bit where I realize, I mean, there are even like there's a character called Bella who Heath kind of gets with to get his revenge on Kat for something, and it was really only when like he goes away and comes back that I was like, hang on a minute, he's gone away and come back, and now we're really into him, and that's when it kind of clicked for me. I do think, so I will say it's a really fun read, like really fun. I think it'd be a great holiday read. I think if you like Daisy Jones and the Six, you'll really like it. The kind of confessionals from peers and commentators alongside a kind of main narrative really worked for me. I think it kind of allows the plot to unfold in a different way by having those like perspectives interspersed throughout. They are having sex constantly, but you never see any of it. So again, it's not smutty, which there's a place for smut, absolutely there is, but there is a lot of that around at the moment, and not everybody wants to read that kind of version of romance. So I like that you can read about people with great chemistry without like the sex being the whole part, the whole focus of the book. There is definitely something quite hilarious to me about, with Wuthering Heights retelling in mind, there is an inciting incident where Heath is hurt and Kat kind of pushes him away, and then he goes away, and then in revenge comes back and has become the best goddamn ice dancer the world has ever seen. And I do think that's quite funny. But I also, like, we've talked about this with classics, like being able to not take them so seriously and just enjoy the story and make something new out of it is also something that I would like to see more of. And it was very, very readable. I think you will like it. I don't think you'll feel it's strayed as far from the book as the Wuthering Heights film, even with the ice dancing.
I just want to know what happens at the end, but that will ruin the book, so I will just read it.
Okay, now it's time for a listener dilemma from our shelf help section. As always, if you'd like to submit a question, we are at Stack Podcast on Instagram and TikTok, or you can comment wherever you're watching on YouTube or Spotify. Rob on Instagram asks, "Hi Jake and Ella, really enjoying the podcast. Hoping you can help me with a pretty basic dilemma. I want to get back into reading again, having fallen away from it in recent years. Why is it so difficult to get back into it again? What are your top 3 fiction books to start somebody off on a rediscovery of reading again?" Jake, have you ever fallen out of love with reading?
I've definitely fallen out of love with reading or had no time for it. And I think sometimes those are the same thing, because if you don't have time for it, you just don't really know what you're missing.
And you kind of forget how much you love it.
Yeah, and then it takes often like a really good book for you to be like, God, I love this. I also think, go to a bookshop, have a browse, buy a lovely, pretty, exciting book that you're really, 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 really in your wheelhouse, and immediately go and sit, ideally in the bookshop cafe or a nearby cafe, but like make that like the nicest thing in the world, and really luxuriate in what it means to actually just have time for that. Like turn your phone off, and actually that kind of like lifestyle version of what reading is, I think is
that's
the best
really
way
nice.
to reignite.
I think that's a great idea, because I was going to say, I think that reading, I think you just have to keep reminding yourself that reading is a skill. It isn't just a hobby. It isn't just something that you can pick up and instantly get sucked into. Or I certainly can't if I've fallen away from it. I have to remember it is a skill, and I think there is something easier about getting back into going and having a nice pastry at a cafe. Your brain instantly will be like, I'm having a nice time. So I like your advice there.
Thank you. I think your brain has to get into that mode of being like, I'm actively thinking of the imagination doing this book, and I'm relaxing at the same time, and those feel quite in opposition to each other. So you have to get yourself in that space where it's doing both.
Yeah, and hopefully that helps. Have you got, maybe we do 3 total rather than 3 each, because the listeners have got to get on with their day.
We've already done 6.
Yeah, this is so true. You go first.
Okay, I'm going to go You Think It, I'll Say It, Curtis Sittenfeld. I read that on holiday. It is the last Curtis Sittenfeld that I had left to read, so I'm very sad now because I've read them all.
She'll keep writing.
She'll keep writing. Those are kind of short stories on love and relationships that I think short stories is a good way to kind of like, you'll have this whole book, but you'll read 30 pages, you'll have read a story, and you'll be like, beginning, middle, end, love. So that's my first. What's yours?
I am going to recommend The Ministry of Time by Kaliane Bradley. I think because we don't know what Rob's favourite genres were before, I've kind of used this to scoop up multiple genres and offer them to him. So it's kind of sci-fi, it's kind of romance, it's definitely kind of a big adventure of a novel. It's very plotty, and I think that can really help if you've been out of reading for a while, just to like really focus on a great plot with great momentum. So it's about a secret British government project that rescues historical figures from certain death to test time travel. An unnamed civil servant falls in love with a Victorian polar explorer she is assigned to monitor, and meanwhile there are other kind of forces at play. There's great jeopardy for the rescued characters. It's not just this polar explorer. There are also, like, there's someone from, I think, Shakespearean England who's kind of constantly wishing a pox on people, and so there's like real humour to it, but there's also just so much happens in that book, and it's really genre defying. So that would be my pick. What's your last one?
I'm going to go on with that I have not read yet, but I think works in the going to the shop thing, which is May We Feed the King by Rebecca Parry, which I know we both want to read. It was on the book long list.
Yeah.
I think a big book, but like one that so many people have loved. Feels quite different. I think sometimes also just going for a book that's like a bit different to anything else. You're not going to start reading it and feel like you've read this before. I think that could be a real goer, and that'll be everywhere, so that'll be very easy to find as well.
Love that.
Thank you for listening to this vengeful episode of Stack with Jake and Ella. You can find details of all the books we've talked about today in the show notes, and you can find us at Stack Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. It'd be amazing if you left us a review wherever you're listening. It is the best way to support the show, and we've loved hearing your messages about welcoming us back, so thank you very much for those.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you. We'll be back in 2 weeks with an episode on weddings. This is one of my most anticipated episodes of the season because there is so much drama in the run-up to and the day itself of a wedding in fiction and in life. We will see you then.
Stack with Jake and Ella is an independent podcast production. It is produced by Jake Williams and Ella Horn.
Our theme music was created by Thomas Clark.